Delilah Monroe stood barefoot on the terrace, one hand resting on the gentle curve of her stomach, the other clutching a glass of ginger tea she had no intention of drinking. Across the harbor, the lights of Charleston flickered genteel and golden, like the city had something to prove. Inside, the laughter was louder than usual. Cole's voice, easy commanding, blended with the smooth jazz echoing from the grand piano in the parlor. She could hear Rhea's laugh, too. That laugh, sharp as champagne, always just a beat too loud, like it needed to be heard. The party was for investors, or so Cole said. A last-minute gathering to celebrate the acquisition of a downtown block he'd spent months courting. And yet Delilah had seen the guest list. There were no city councilmen, no architects, just influencers, developers, and women whose dresses cost more than Delilah's first car. She hadn't been invited. That wasn't an accident. Ms. Harrington Verna said softly, appearing beside her with the grace of someone used to invisibility. "Do you need me to stay longer tonight?" Delilah turned, offering a tired smile. "No, Verna. Go home. You've done more than enough." Verna hesitated. The crowd's different tonight. More performative. Delilah nodded her fingers, brushing the silk hem of her maternity robe. Everything is these days. When Verna left, Delilah stood alone a moment longer, then stepped back inside. The sound of heels on marble, clinking glasses, and curated flirtation washed over her. No one noticed her. She preferred it that way tonight. She walked past the staircase where Cole had once proposed with a vintage ring and a promise of permanence. Past the kitchen where they used to cook breakfast barefoot when money was still a future and not a performance. Every room had changed. Or maybe she had. Cole entered from the hallway jacket, open a tumbler of something amber in hand. He stopped short when he saw her. "You're up," he said, like she was a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. She tilted her head. "Didn't realize I needed an invitation to my own home?" He glanced toward the party, then back to her. "It's a business thing. Press. Potential collaborators. Rhea's a collaborator now." He sighed, too rehearsed. "It's not what you think. I haven't said what I think." He stepped closer. "You look tired. Let me handle this, okay? You shouldn't stress right now." There it was, the shift. From guilty to concerned. From husband to PR crisis manager. Delilah held his gaze. "I won't be part of something I can't recognize anymore." Cole set the glass down, voice low. "This isn't the time, Dee." She nodded once, the way someone does when they're no longer asking permission. "I know." Later, when the house finally quieted and the guests had melted into the night, Delilah returned to the office. The air still held traces of cologne and candle wax. Cole had left his laptop open, an oversight rare for him. She didn't touch it. She didn't have to. The proof was already in her heart. Instead, she walked to the sideboard, opened the top drawer, and pulled out the file folder she'd hidden there 2 weeks ago. The real estate documents were already notarized. The buyer was a quiet woman from Beaufort, wealthy, private, and discreet. The house was no longer theirs. She had sold it. Not out of spite, out of clarity. She didn't need the marble floors or the rooftop garden. She needed peace. And her child deserved a foundation built on truth, not perception. In the morning she'd be gone. But first there was one thing left to do. Delilah walked upstairs into the nursery. The room was still half-finished, pale blue walls, unopened boxes, a crib that hadn't yet been assembled. She sat in the rocker and let the quiet stretch. She thought of her mother, who had once told her, "When you build a life, make sure it's yours, not just one you decorate." Her father had been quieter but firmer. "Don't ever let money convince you it's love." She had tried. God, she had tried. Downstairs, she heard Cole laughing into a phone. His voice, warm and rehearsed, still had the power to sound like home. But it wasn't. Not anymore. She stood slowly, the baby shifting with her. A life waiting to begin. Back in her bedroom, she opened the closet and pulled out the weekender bag she'd packed 2 nights earlier. Essentials only. The rest she would leave behind like a skin she'd outgrown. She placed a note on the nightstand. Cole, I hope you get everything you think you want. This house is no longer ours. Our child will know peace. I will no longer explain myself. She walked to the window, taking one last look at the city that had both crowned and caged her. A car pulled up quietly. Her father stepped out. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. When she stepped into the night, the air smelled like rain. Not a storm, just a change in the weather. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The morning after Delilah left Charleston woke with a soft drizzle and headlines that hadn't caught up yet. The estate on Rutledge Avenue sat quiet behind wrought iron gates, unaware it no longer belonged to the man who bought it to impress the world. Delilah watched the rain trace rivers down the front window of her father's bungalow. The house was modest beige siding, dark shutters, but there was something grounding in its simplicity. Here, silence didn't echo. It settled. She had spent the night on the pull-out sofa, restless but not regretful. Inez had offered her his room, but she'd refused. She needed to feel the smallness of the space. It reminded her she wasn't a ghost of who she'd been, just someone mid-transformation. You sleep? Inez asked from the kitchen voice, wrapped in the scent of pecan coffee, and old jazz humming through the radio. Enough, she said, turning toward him. Your couch still dips in the middle. It's called character, he replied with a half smile. Everything with roots sinks a little. Delilah walked in and sat at the kitchen table. The chair creaked beneath her honest sounds in an honest house. She wrapped both hands around the mug he set down. Thank you for coming last night. I was always coming. You just finally asked? Her throat tightened. You must have known. Inez nodded once. I didn't want to push you to leave before you were ready. And I didn't want to sit back and watch you disappear. The room fell quiet, except for the clink of his spoon against ceramic. I didn't know how to explain, she whispered. You don't owe me an explanation, Delilah. But you owe yourself a life. She breathed in deep the way she used to after swimming too long underwater. I sold the house, she said, more to hear it out loud than to inform him. It's done. I'm not going back. Inez didn't flinch. Then it's time to start something new. She looked at him. You ever regret walking away from the Navy? He chuckled softly. Every time I do taxes. Never when I sleep. He leaned forward. Peace is the only wealth you take with you. Everything else depreciates. Her smile was small but real. I need a job. You need a doctor's appointment first. Then a job. I already have a doctor. I just didn't tell anyone. He raised an eyebrow. Smart. She sipped her coffee, the bitter warmth cutting through fatigue. I want to work again. Not for the money, just to remember who I was. You were always her. She just got outvoted for a while. Delilah looked out the window again. The drizzle had stopped, and the sky was beginning to unfasten itself. By noon, she was standing in front of a storefront that used to be her favorite stop before she married Cole, the kind of shop that sold hand-thrown pottery, woven throw pillows, and candles, with names like Quiet Meadow and Good Divorce. The sign read, Porch and Pine. The owner, Simone Everett, had once taken Delilah under her wing when she was a junior designer. Back then, Simone had called her brilliant with broken pieces. Now Delilah hoped there was still room for broken. She stepped inside the little brass bell above the door, singing her arrival. Simone looked up from behind the counter, blinked, and took a slow breath. Delilah Monroe, she said. Or is it Harrington? Delilah hesitated. Monroe again. If that's all right. Simone didn't ask. She simply nodded. You here to browse or build? Both, Delilah said. I want to work. I don't need a title or a salary, just a place to remember my name. Simone stepped out from behind the counter, arms open. Then come home. It wasn't dramatic. It was just true. And that was what Delilah needed most. They spent the afternoon arranging the front window, placing late autumn decor in curated angles. Delilah moved slower now, her hand occasionally resting on the firm swell of her belly. You sure you should be on your feet this much? Simone asked gently. I need to be. You always had a restless heart. That's why your designs told stories instead of selling trends. Delilah smiled. You remembered. I remember all my heartbreak girls. She paused. There's a lot of rumors about Cole. About you. You ready for that? Delilah thought of the yacht photos, the empty nursery, the night she packed in silence. I'm not ready for anything, she said, but I'm no longer pretending. That night, she returned to her father's house with sore feet and a full heart. Inez was sitting on the porch, reading the paper like it still mattered. You good? He asked without looking up. Better than I expected. You always were. She sat beside him, the porch swing creaking under their weight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city hummed gently in the distance. I heard from Rachel today, Delilah said after a while. The one with the tech firm, she said something's shifting in Cole's finances. Quietly, she picked up signals in his LLCs. He's scrambling. Inez didn't look surprised. Men who build empires on sand always do. Delilah turned to him. I didn't leave to destroy him. I know, but I also didn't leave to save him. Then you left for the right reason. She leaned back, the stars just starting to push through the dusk. I want this child to know that peace is something we protect, even when it's quiet, even when it looks like nothing. Inez placed a hand over hers. Then build that kind of life, and let everything else fall where it's supposed to. Inside, the phone buzzed. She didn't move. She didn't need to. Let it ring. The next morning, porch and pine buzzed with a quiet energy that matched the heartbeat Delilah hadn't realized she'd missed. The scent of eucalyptus hung in the air. Light streamed through the shop's wide front windows, casting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. There was comfort in the simplicity of it all, the scrape of wooden chairs, the low murmur of jazz, and the slow rhythm of something beginning again. Delilah stood behind the front counter, adjusting a display of hand-painted vases. The baby shifted a low roll under her ribs. She placed a hand on her stomach, whispering softly, We're okay. This is where we start. The door opened, and a gust of crisp fall air followed a tall figure into the shop. He carried a leather messenger bag and a coffee cup with a smudge of ink on his thumb. He wasn't the type of man who lingered in boutiques, but he didn't look uncomfortable either. Simone glanced up from a stack of inventory sheets. Morning, Jonah, she said. Didn't expect to see you this early. Deadline moved. Coffee's not helping. He smiled and looked toward Delilah. And you must be the Delilah who used to make this window look like a poem. Delilah raised a brow. Used to. He laughed, a warm sound that didn't try too hard. It still does. I just remember a Christmas display you did in 2018. It made a grown man cry in the street. Is that a compliment or a confession? A little of both, he said, stepping closer. Jonah Reese. I rent the office upstairs. Freelance journalist and unofficial critic of excellent window design. Delilah extended her hand, curious. Delilah Monroe. He shook it gently. I know. She blinked. You do. Inez mentioned you. Said you were brilliant at making quiet spaces speak. That stopped her for a beat. My dad talks too much. Only about the people he's proud of. Jonah nodded once and turned toward the back steps, but not before offering her a crooked smile. "Glad you're back? This street missed you." Delilah watched him go, something inside her fluttering, not romantic, not yet. Just recognition. A man who saw without scanning, who listened without reaching. Simone appeared beside her, arms folded. "You okay, yeah? Just didn't expect him to know my name." Simone grinned. "He knows a lot of names. He writes stories no one else dares to publish. People trust him." "Is he safe?" "Yeah. And smart. Which can be rare in this zip code." Delilah turned back to her vases, but her mind was still upstairs. That afternoon, while rearranging textiles near the dressing corner, Delilah heard the muffled thump of feet coming down the back stairs. Jonah emerged a moment later, rubbing his neck like he'd been hunched too long. "You ever get stuck in a paragraph that refuses to behave?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "All the time. But mine were in color palettes and mood boards." He chuckled. "Same thing, really. Just a different way of making people feel." There was something in the way he said it. Not flirtatious, not invasive. Just real. He walked over to the counter and pointed at a small stack of note cards bound with ribbon. "These yours?" Delilah nodded. "I started designing quote cards back when I needed to hear something kind every morning. Thought maybe others did too." Jonah picked one up. "A quiet life is not a lesser one." He looked at her. "You ever publish these?" "No," she said. "They're just reminders." He set the card down carefully. Sometimes reminders are what keep people from breaking. Their eyes met, not romantically, not dramatically. Just two people sitting in the quiet between what was and what might be. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows across the shop floor, Simone approached Delilah at closing time. "I'm heading out. Jonah's locking up behind you." "You good?" Delilah nodded. "I'm good." After Simone left, Jonah appeared again, coat slung over one arm. "Walk you to your car," he offered. "I don't drive," she said. "I'm staying with my father, just a few blocks over." Jonah hesitated. "Would you mind company? I need a walk to shake off the screen." She considered, then nodded. "Sure, I wouldn't mind." They stepped outside together. The streetlights hummed to life above them. The air was cool but not biting. Charleston was soft at dusk, old bricks and fading magnolias, history layered like paint. They walked without urgency, their footsteps sinking without intention. "You always been here?" Jonah asked. "Born and raised," Delilah said. "Left for design school, came back when Cole wanted roots." Jonah didn't press. "I moved here after the newsroom folded back home. Thought I'd stay 6 months. That was 8 years ago." Delilah smiled. "Charleston does that. It's sticky in a good way." They reached the gate to her father's house. Jonah stopped, rocking slightly on his heels. "Thank you," she said. "For walking with me." Anytime, he replied. "And I meant what I said earlier. Your work speaks." Delilah opened the gate, then paused. "You're writing something now?" He nodded. "Piece on development deals and conflicts of interest. Not exactly a page-turner, but it matters." Something in her chest shifted. "You should look into the Harrington contracts," she said quietly. Jonah blinked. "Cole Harrington?" She nodded once. "Start with the land swap on Waterman Street. Follow the paper trail." He studied her, surprised. "You sure you want to be part of that? I'm not part of anything anymore," she said. "I'm just done being quiet." Jonah gave her a look not of pity, but of respect. "Then I'll listen." She stepped inside the gate. "Good night, Jonah." "Good night, Delilah." She closed the door behind her heart, steady. Inside, Inez sat at the table, reading, glasses low on his nose. "Friend, not yet," she said. Just someone who walks at the right pace." Her father looked up. "Sometimes that's how it starts." She smiled, placed a hand on her belly, and whispered to the child growing inside her. Today felt like a step. And it did. Small, honest, unapologetically hers. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The storm wasn't loud, just persistent. Rain whispered against the window panes of Inez's house, soft and rhythmic, like a clock counting down. Delilah sat curled on the edge of the couch, a stack of unopened mail in her lap, her thumb brushing against the corner of a sealed envelope she'd been avoiding all morning. Inside was the last piece of the sale. Final documents. The transfer of title for the Harrington estate was complete. All it needed now was her signature, and the past would stop belonging to her. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Cole Harrington 1, missed call, one voicemail. She didn't listen to it. She didn't need to. His calls had shifted tone lately, less righteous, more performative concern. But it was the silence after them that said more. She stood, walked the envelope to the kitchen table, and sat across from her father. He was balancing his checkbook the way he had since she was 6, paper pen calculator, older than some cars. "I'm signing it today," she said. Inez didn't look up. "You sure?" Delilah stared at the papers. "No, but I'm done waiting to be." He nodded once, calm as always. "Good. Just remember, walking away is a strategy, not a surrender." She inhaled slow, the baby pressing gently against her ribs. "I'm not walking away. I'm stepping out of the performance." The sound of the rain deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train sighed through the trees. By afternoon, she was back at Porch and Pine. The shop was quiet, end-of-week lull. Delilah spent the time reworking the autumn display, weaving soft copper lights through bundles of dried herbs and antique frames. Jonah appeared in the doorway between the shop and the stairs, coffee in one hand, notebook in the other. "You know," he said, "for someone who claims she's not rebuilding her life yet, you're making this window look like a place people come to begin again." Delilah smirked. "You always open conversations with poetry. Only with women who sell the house out from under a millionaire and don't flinch when it rains." She laughed before she could stop herself. "That's oddly specific." He leaned on the doorframe. "You good?" She hesitated. "I signed the papers this morning." Jonah's expression shifted, softened. "How's it feel?" "Like I closed a door, and the silence on the other side isn't mine to fix." They stood in it for a beat, the silence, the space between. Then Jonah said carefully, "I followed your tip, that land swap on Waterman Street. It's messier than I expected. There's a shell company involved. Looks like it's tied to someone on the city zoning board." Delilah's stomach tightened. "Do you think he knows you're looking?" "Doubt it." "Not yet, but someone will smell it soon." Her voice lowered. "This isn't about revenge, I know," Jonah said. "It's about patterns." She looked up. "You believe me?" Inez does. "That's enough for me to start." He paused. "But if you want out of it, I don't," she said. "I want it to matter, even if I don't wear the last name anymore." He nodded once. "Then we keep going." She exhaled, turned back to the display, and adjusted one last sprig of eucalyptus. "You ever publish something that made things worse before they got better?" Jonah didn't hesitate. "Every story worth telling does." That night, Delilah sat on the porch again. The rain had passed, leaving the air cool and clean. She held a warm mug of cider and watched the wind tease the edges of the porch swing. The door creaked open behind her. Inez, but it wasn't her father. It was Rachel. Delilah blinked. "What are you doing here?" Rachel stepped out, coat draped over her arm, her expression unreadable. "I got a message. From someone I didn't expect." Delilah stood, who Rachel looked at her carefully. Rhea Vaughn. The name landed like a dropped glass. Delilah's voice thinned. What did she say? She asked me to meet her. Said she didn't want to be seen contacting you directly. Delilah frowned. Why would she reach out to you? Rachel hesitated. Because she thinks I might still care about what happens to you, and she knows I don't owe Cole anything. Delilah felt the baby shift like her body was bracing itself. She's the reason I signed those papers, she said quietly. Not the only reason, but that party, that was the end. Rachel nodded slowly. She says there's more, that Cole's being set up by someone in his circle, that he's about to be used for a much bigger fall. Delilah crossed her arms. And she suddenly cares. She said something that stuck. Rachel paused. I thought if I stood close enough to power, I'd be safe. But now I know power doesn't protect women. It uses them, then erases them when they ask for answers. Delilah was quiet. Rachel watched her. Do you want me to ignore it? Delilah shook her head. No. I want you to meet her. You sure she's not the villain? Delilah said. She's just the mirror. And I need to see how far I've come. Rachel placed a hand on her friend's shoulder. I'll set it up. Carefully. Delilah sat down again, the weight of everything settling in a new way. She no longer needed a fight. She just wanted to know how many women had been told silence was the cost of survival. Inside the house, Inez watched from the window. He didn't interrupt. Some stories need space before they can be spoken, and his daughter was learning how to speak hers without asking permission. The gate buzzed once. Cole looked up from his whiskey glass. The ice already melted the view of the garden below, no longer calming. Outside, mist blurred the Charleston skyline. Inside, the penthouse felt like a hotel suite left in someone else's name. He rose, slowly walked barefoot across the hardwood floors, and opened the door to find Miles waiting, hair-damp briefcase in hand. You're not returning calls, Miles said, stepping inside without asking. That's a bad look. Cole shut the door, leaned against it, and stared at his brother. I'm not interested in optics right now. Unfortunately, the board is. Miles set his briefcase on the kitchen island, snapped it open, and pulled out a folder. There's a leak. Cole didn't move. Zoning records, development funding trails. The Waterman Street property you pushed through last quarter, there's a paper trail that points directly to your name and a zoning commissioner with a suddenly upgraded lifestyle. Cole's jaw flexed. That wasn't me. I know. But it's under a shell company registered to a holding firm owned by one of your advisors. You signed off. Cole rubbed his temples. It was routine. I trusted the paperwork. That's the problem, Miles said. You were trusting paperwork while people were rewriting the rules underneath it. A long silence followed. Then Cole spoke low. Delilah warned me. Miles's brow furrowed. When the night she left. She didn't say it like a threat. She just looked at me like I wasn't who I thought I was anymore. Miles walked to the window, stared out. You're not. Cole sat down at the edge of the couch, his voice quieter now. She sold the house. I saw. I didn't know she had it in her. Miles turned one hand on the windowsill. She always had it in her. You just stopped looking. Cole's head dropped into his hands. You need to get ahead of this, Miles said. There's chatter. Someone in the press is sniffing. A freelancer not tied to a major outlet yet. But the minute this hits public record, Cole looked up sharply. Freelancer? Name I don't know, but Cole did. Jonah. It all clicked. Delilah's retreat wasn't silence. It was strategy. She was giving him space to collapse. The phone on the counter buzzed. Miles glanced at the screen. Rhea. Cole hesitated. Answer it, Miles said. She's involved in this, isn't she? I don't know anymore. He picked up, put her on speaker. Cole Rhea's voice came through thinner than usual, unsure. I think we're being followed. Cole stiffened. What are you talking about? I had lunch with Rachel Kim. She asked questions I didn't expect her to know how to ask. Someone's building something. Cole exchanged a glance with Miles. She asked me about a yacht party I didn't post. Rhea continued. She said your wife had seen the photos. Ex-wife Cole almost corrected but couldn't form the words. Rhea's voice softened. I think I was part of something bigger, and I didn't see it until too late. Miles crossed his arms. Ask her what she wants. Cole spoke carefully. Rhea, why are you calling me a pause? Because I'm not the villain in this story, and I don't want to be collateral damage. The line went dead. Cole sat back, blinking. Miles shut the folder and slid it back into his case. This isn't about a woman scorned anymore. It's about paper, Cole. Paper and silence. You gave both to the wrong people. Cole closed his eyes. What do I do now? You find the truth, Miles said, and you tell it before someone else does. Meanwhile, back at Porch and Pine, Delilah was arranging a shelf of hand-poured candles when Jonah stepped inside, soaked from the drizzle. Got a minute? He asked. She nodded, gesturing him toward the back. They sat in the tiny office behind the shop, the walls lined with boxes and shipping labels. I confirmed the Waterman Street deal is tied to someone in zoning, Jonah said. And the payment trails lead back to a shell company, one that received a wire from Harrington Capital. Delilah exhaled. I knew it. I still don't have proof that Cole orchestrated it. But someone used his name. Maybe with permission. Maybe without. She leaned forward, voice low. I don't want him destroyed. I want him exposed. There's a difference. Jonah studied her. That's why this matters. Because you're not doing this to be right. You're doing it to be honest. She looked down. Do you ever write something that makes someone you care about hate you? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. More often than I'd like. And I keep writing, because the alternative is silence. Delilah nodded, emotion creeping up her throat. I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of becoming small again. Jonah leaned back, gentle. You left the house before it fell. That's not small. That's brave. The door chimed. Simone called from the front delivery for you, Delilah. She and Jonah stood. Delilah stepped into the shop to find a white box with her name written in calligraphy. Inside was a single item, the photo from the yacht party printed on glossy stock. No note, no explanation. Just a headline typed in red, the wife. The mistress. The money trail. Delilah turned the photo over. On the back, scrawled in looping script, you weren't the only one watching. Her fingers curled around the edge of the paper. Not in fear, but in resolution. Jonah stepped beside her. Looks like someone wants a scene. Delilah met his gaze, voice steady. Then let's give them the truth. The photograph sat on the counter at Porch and Pine, like it had a voice of its own. Delilah hadn't moved, it hadn't put it away. Let it sit there. Let it speak. It wasn't the image that hurt. It was the truth it confirmed people were watching, whispering, calculating. Not just Cole, not just Rhea. Someone else had decided her story had value now that it could be spun. Simone came out of the back with a clipboard, paused when she saw the photo. Is that who I think it is? She asked, voice low. Delilah nodded. Yacht party, last fall. I didn't know about it then. Simone studied her. And now I know everything I didn't want to know. Jonah leaned against the front door, arms crossed. He hadn't said much since they opened the package, but his silence felt active, like he was drawing a line around this moment before it got taken from them. I don't think it's a warning, he finally said. It's an invitation. To what? To play the game. Delilah shook her head. I already folded. No, Jonah said. You changed the game. She looked up at him, searching for something in his face. Not reassurance, just honesty. And he gave it. I want to tell the story, he continued. Yours, but not as an exposé, not as revenge, as record. Delilah hesitated. I'm not sure I'm ready for the world to know everything. They don't need everything, Jonah said. Just enough to make silence cost something. The shop door opened, suddenly breaking the tension. A woman stepped in, mid-40s, tired eyes, thick sweater, wrapped tight. She hovered near the display table, staring at a shelf of handmade journals. Delilah gave Jonah a look that said later, and walked over. Let me know if I can help, she offered softly. The woman turned slowly. I used to come here years ago, before everything changed. Delilah tilted her head. Changed how my husband died, the woman said. Heart attack. 2 months after he told me he wanted a divorce. Delilah blinked. I was angry. At him. At God. At myself, for still missing someone who clearly didn't love me anymore. They stood in that quiet. I'm sorry, Delilah said gently. The woman nodded. I just wanted to feel safe again. This place used to feel safe. Delilah picked up one of the journals and placed it in her hands. You're welcome here, as long as you need. The woman clutched it to her chest like it weighed more than paper. Thank you, she whispered, then left without buying it, but also without putting it down. When the door closed behind her, Delilah exhaled. That Jonah said quietly from behind her is why people will listen to you. She turned. You think I'm strong? I think you're tired. And still choosing to be kind anyway. Delilah smiled, a small one. You always talk like that. Only when it's true. There was a beat. Then 2. Inez is hosting dinner tonight, Delilah said, surprising even herself. Nothing fancy. Just something warm. Jonah straightened his voice, careful. Are you inviting me? I'm not sure, she said. Maybe I'm just telling you. He smiled easy. Well, if I show up, you'll know it was a good idea. That evening, rain ticked against the windows again. Charleston couldn't decide if it wanted fall or not. Inez stood over the stove, ladling stew into mismatched bowls, humming to the low jazz playing through the living room. Delilah was setting the table when Jonah knocked once and stepped in. Inez looked up, eyebrow raised. Mr. Reese, he said, extending a hand. Glad you came. You hungry or just curious? Both, Sir Jonah said, shaking his hand with a smile. Delilah handed him a napkin. He's harmless, Dad. Inez chuckled. Nobody with a notebook is harmless, but he's welcome. Dinner was quiet, rich with the kind of pauses that mean people are thinking, not uncomfortable. Jonah asked thoughtful questions. Inez answered with old Navy stories and occasional dry wit. Delilah mostly listened. It wasn't romantic, not in the candlelight and eyes-locking sense, but there was intimacy in the ordinary. Afterward, while Inez cleared the table, Jonah leaned on the kitchen counter. Thank you, he said. For what? For letting me see this part of you. Delilah met his gaze. You always ask for permission when it matters. She stepped a little closer, the weight of the day still in her shoulders. I'm not trying to build something new yet. I'm not asking you to. Then why are you here? He took a breath. Because I think the truth needs witnesses, and because I think you deserve to be known outside of what broke. Delilah closed her eyes for a beat. When she opened them, her voice was soft. I don't know what happens next. That's the good part, Jonah said. You get to decide. A silence stretched between them, gentle, not rushed. Then Inez's voice floated from the other room. "Jonah, you drink coffee past 9 p.m. I'll regret it. But yes," he called back, stepping away with a wink. Delilah watched him go, something shifting in her chest again. Not like before, not like love, but like air returning to a room that had been too quiet for too long. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, something softer was just beginning. Delilah woke to the smell of cinnamon and rain. The soft knock at her door came a few seconds later, and then Inez's voice from the hallway. "Coffee's on. Jonah left something for you." She sat up slowly, one hand on her belly, the weight of a growing life grounding her. The baby kicked gently, more like a nudge than a protest. She whispered, "We're still here," then stood, walked barefoot into the kitchen. A manila envelope sat next to her coffee mug, her name written in Jonah's clean, slanted handwriting. She opened it. Inside was a printed draft, his story. She pulled the first page free and began to read. It wasn't what she expected. It didn't start with betrayal. It didn't mention yachts or leaked photos or land deals. It started with her. Some women disappear quietly. Others rebuild in plain sight. This is a story about the latter. Not a scandal, but a survival. Delilah sat down, heart thudding in a way that wasn't fear. It was exposure, but not in the tabloid way. This felt like someone had seen the blueprint behind the skin. She flipped through eyes, darting over phrases that clutched at her ribs. She didn't leave to ruin him. She left because the walls had stopped echoing back her voice. She stopped reading at that line. Closed the envelope. Inez poured a cup of coffee and slid it toward her. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know how he did it," she whispered. "He saw me without asking for more than I could give." Inez stirred his own cup. "That's rare." She nodded. "It feels like a mirror. One I didn't hang. That afternoon at Porch and Pine, the air was thick with pre-storm tension. Charleston skies were bruising clouds, stacking like guilt. Delilah stood behind the register, straightening a stack of new arrivals, when Rachel walked in, hair swept up, sunglasses, still on, despite the lack of sun. "We need to talk," Rachel said, tone clipped. Delilah glanced at Simone, who gave her a quick nod, and disappeared into the back. "What's wrong?" Delilah asked, already bracing. Rachel pulled a folded paper from her bag and laid it flat on the counter. It was a draft of an article, but not Jonah's. It was Cole's PR team's version. Headline: Harrington speaks the cost of silence in business and marriage. Delilah didn't touch it. Rachel's voice was tight. "He's going public. Preemptive narrative, framing the Waterman deal as a misstep by a former consultant, that would be you, says the pressure of the pregnancy caused emotional distance, that he regrets his failure to prioritize his wife." Delilah's jaw clenched. "He's writing my absence like it was his compassion. He's also painting Jonah as a disgruntled ex-contributor with a personal vendetta." The words hung like smoke. "Do you think people will believe it?" Delilah asked quietly. Rachel hesitated. "Some will, but not all, and not for long." Delilah looked down at the paper. He always rewrote things in his head. I didn't realize how skilled he'd become at publishing them. Rachel placed a hand on hers. "You can't stay quiet now." "I wasn't planning to," Delilah said, calmer than she felt. That evening, after the shop closed, Delilah climbed the stairs to Jonah's office. He was there pacing, phone in hand, hair messier than usual. He looked up when she entered. "You saw it?" She nodded. So did Rachel. He blew out a breath. "I'm not worried about myself." "But he's trying to make you look weaker," she finished. "Or unstable, or both." Jonah put the phone down. "I can accelerate the story. Publish tomorrow." Delilah walked to the window, watched the sky darken. "I want to be careful," she said. "I want the tone to stay mine. It will. I want people to feel what it means to leave quietly and still be right." Jonah stepped closer. "Then we lead with you. Not your pain. Your power." She turned to face him. "You think anyone will listen?" He nodded once. "I think the right people already are." Silence stretched again, thicker now, more charged. Delilah moved toward the desk, pulled out the marked-up draft he'd given her. "I want to add something," she said. Jonah handed her a pen. She wrote slowly, deliberately, beneath his last paragraph. "Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do isn't staying or fighting or winning. It's leaving without setting the house on fire. It's knowing the damage isn't hers to carry anymore." When she finished, she set the pen down and looked up at him. "Now it's done." Jonah stared at the page. It's more than done. It's undeniable. A knock at the door interrupted them. Simone peeked in. "Sorry," she said, eyes darting between them. "Delilah, there's someone downstairs asking for you. Says she won't leave without a minute." Delilah's heart ticked hard. "Who, Rhea Vaughn?" Jonah stiffened. Delilah didn't. "I'll go." Simone gave her a hesitant look. "You sure she came to be seen? I'll let her." Delilah descended the stairs slowly. Rhea stood near the candle shelf, out of place, but composed, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Delilah," she said, voice measured. "You made it. I needed to." Delilah folded her arms. "You sent the photo, didn't you?" Rhea nodded. "I thought you deserved to know you were never the only one left in the dark. And now I want to be free from it, too." Delilah looked at her carefully. "Then say what you came to say." Rhea's voice cracked. "He promised me I was the future. And then I realized he didn't even know how to love the present." Delilah blinked. "I don't want his legacy," Rhea said. "I want my name back." Delilah exhaled. "Then stop standing behind his." Rhea nodded. "I'll give you what I have. Contracts, emails, the real story." Delilah tilted her head. Why now Rhea's voice was barely a whisper. "Because you walked out, and I watched the door stay open." Delilah stepped forward just close enough for the weight of her words to land. Then walk through it. And for the first time, Rhea did. It started with a thumb drive. Rhea slid it across the cafe table like it was a napkin, not a grenade. She didn't look at it. She didn't look at Delilah either. Just kept her eyes on the window where the soft drizzle turned the street into a watercolor. "That's everything," she said, voice flat. Emails. Wire transfers. Even some recorded voicemails he forgot I had access to. Delilah didn't touch it right away. Her fingers hovered just over the small black rectangle. "Why did you keep it?" Rhea finally looked at her. "Because I knew there'd be a day I'd need proof I wasn't imagining things." Delilah nodded once. "I know that feeling." They sat in silence, two women with nothing left to compete for, and more in common than either of them had ever wanted to admit. "He still thinks I'll come back," Rhea said quietly. "That I'm just mad. Maybe he needs to believe that," Delilah replied, "because the alternative would mean he lost us both." Rhea smiled bitterly. "He didn't lose me. He never had me. I was a role he cast. And the second I stopped playing it, I became a liability." Delilah took a sip of tea, her voice low. "Do you regret it?" "Which part, all of it?" Rhea's eyes glistened. She blinked hard. "I regret ignoring the feeling in my gut. The one that whispered something was off. I regret letting charm mute my instincts." Delilah nodded. "We're taught not to trust our own discomfort. And by the time we do, it costs everything." Delilah finally reached out and slid the drive into her bag. "This will help Jonah finish the story." "I know," Rhea said, and then paused. "I'm not asking to be part of it." Delilah blinked. You don't want to clear your name? Rhea shook her head. I just want out. Quietly. I want to find out who I am when I'm not someone's mistake. Delilah's voice softened. I hope you do. They sat a moment longer. Then Rhea stood, pulled her coat tighter, and without another word walked out into the Charleston mist. That night, Jonah sat on the floor of Delilah's living room laptop, open thumb drive connected. The glow from the screen lit his face in shades of blue and gray. This is more than I thought, he said, scrolling slowly. Contracts signed under dummy corporations, pressure on zoning officials, even internal memos about displacing long-term residents for luxury build-outs. Delilah sat across from him, one hand resting protectively over her belly. Is it enough? Jonah looked up. It's more than enough. This could take down the whole operation, not just Cole, his investors, his legal counsel, the commissioner who greenlit the deal. And what happens to me? Jonah hesitated. Depends on how loud you want to be. Delilah thought for a long moment. I want the truth louder than the rumors, but I want the tone to stay mine. Then we write it your way, Jonah said. No fire, just facts and grace. Delilah smiled faintly. Facts and grace. That sounds like a revolution. Sometimes it is. They worked for hours. Jonah transcribed voicemails. Delilah filled in gaps. At one point, Inez brought in tea and a plate of warm bread, set it down without a word, then disappeared again. Like he understood this wasn't a moment to interrupt. At midnight, they printed the draft. 17 pages. Jonah handed it to her. Last look. After this, it's public. Delilah took it in both hands, read slowly, her breath catching at the parts where her own voice had been woven in. Jonah had used her words, not just quoted her, but honored her. He'd made space for her to be wounded and wise at the same time. At the end of the last page, she wrote a single sentence in pen. We don't have to burn bridges to stop walking across them. She passed it back. It's ready. The story went live the next morning. They didn't announce it. No press release, no Instagram post. Just a quiet publication through Jonah's long-form column. He called it Porchlight Stories, that lit up what people tried to keep hidden. By noon, the phone at Porch and Pine was ringing non-stop. Some calls came from reporters, some from anonymous numbers. A few were messages of thanks, women who said they'd left quietly, too. Some who hadn't yet, but now felt they could. Rachel texted, You did it. Grace and thunder. Proud of you. Inez left a note by her breakfast plate. Truth tastes better than bitterness, always has. Cole did not call, but Miles did. He didn't say much, just, It's out. He's unraveling. You should be proud. Delilah hung up without answering. By late afternoon, Jonah arrived at the shop. His smile was soft, tired, but real. Charleston's talking, he said, in a good way. Delilah stepped out from behind the counter. Do you feel relief? Not yet, but I feel alignment. She walked closer. Thank you for telling it the way it needed to be told. I didn't tell it, Jonah said. I just listened well. There was a pause, the kind that held meaning. Then Delilah said carefully, This part of my life is ending. Jonah nodded. I know. I don't know what comes next. You're allowed to not know. She studied his face. You planning to stick around? Jonah tilted his head. Are you asking if I'm waiting for something? No, she said softly. I'm asking if you're walking at the same pace. His smile grew slow, certain. I'm not ahead. I'm not behind. I'm right here. And for the first time in a long, long time, Delilah believed someone. The rain returned just after dark, threading through the trees and tapping soft against the porch roof. Inside the house, the lights were low, the air warm with cinnamon and old wood. Delilah stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of mint tea, watching the wind chase leaves across the front yard. It was the kind of storm that made the world feel paused. Inez was in the den, reading the paper like he did every night, glasses perched low on his nose. Jonah had just left, walking out with that quiet steadiness she'd come to trust. He didn't linger. He didn't press. He just left space open and wide enough for her to step into if and when she chose. Her phone buzzed against the counter. Unknown number. Delilah's breath caught. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to. Hello. There was a pause. Then a voice she hadn't heard in weeks, measured, careful. Delilah. She said nothing. Cole took the silence as permission. I read the article, he said. Still, she didn't speak. It was elegant, he continued. Too elegant, considering. She blinked eyebrows, knitting. Considering what, that you could have ruined me. Delilah's tone was calm. I wasn't trying to ruin you, Cole. I know, he said, voice low. That's what makes it worse. A long silence followed. Rain ticked steadily in the background. I didn't call to argue, he said, or to justify anything. Then why are you calling? To ask you something. She waited. How did you do it? His voice cracked just slightly. Walk away. And not look back. Delilah pressed her palm to the counter to steady herself. Because I finally understood that leaving isn't weakness, it's clarity. He said nothing. She went on slower now. I spent years asking myself how to stay without shrinking. Then one morning I realized I couldn't answer that anymore, and I didn't want to teach my child how to accept that kind of silence. Cole exhaled. I didn't mean for any of it to turn out like this, I know, she said. But it did. Another beat of quiet. Then softly, is there anything I can do to fix it? Delilah closed her eyes. Fix what, your reputation, your company? No, he said quickly. You. Us. She opened her eyes sharp now. There is no us, Cole. There's what was, and there's what I'm building now. He let the words settle. I wish I'd known how to be better, he said. I wish you'd tried before it cost you everything. She ended the call. Her hand shook only slightly as she set the phone down. But it wasn't grief. It wasn't longing. It was release. The front door creaked open minutes later. Inez appeared in the doorway, coat in hand. Storm's letting up, he said. Want to take a walk? Delilah glanced at the clock. It's late, all the more reason, he said. You look like your head's louder than the weather. She smiled faintly. Let me grab a scarf. They walked the neighborhood slowly, the streets slick with reflections. Street lamps buzzed overhead, throwing halos of gold over puddles. You talked to him? Inez said after a while. She nodded. He called. Inez didn't say anything, just waited. He wanted to know how I left, she said, like it was some magic trick. You gave him something he can't unhear. Delilah nodded. I didn't want to hurt him, I know. But I couldn't lie for him anymore. Inez stopped walking, turned to her. You didn't burn the bridge. You named it. Let him see the cracks. That's more mercy than most ever get. She looked up at him. Do you think it was mercy? I think it was truth, he said. And truth told kindly is the most painful mercy there is. They kept walking. When they reached the porch again, Delilah paused before going inside. I'm scared, she said, of what that people will see me as angry, or bitter, or difficult. Inez leaned against the railing. They will. Some will. She looked at him, startled. But the people who matter, he added, will see that you didn't become hard. You became clear. The next morning she returned to the shop earlier than usual. Something in her needed rhythm. Movement. Normal. Simone was already there, unpacking new boxes. You okay? She asked, glancing up. I think so. Simone studied her. You look like you closed a chapter. More like I finally turned the page. They shared a quiet smile. A customer walked in, a woman Delilah didn't recognize. Maybe mid-60s, silver hair pulled into a loose bun, eyes kind but searching. I read the article, she said softly, standing near the dried florals. Delilah paused, then approached. I hope it landed gently. It did, the woman said. It reminded me of myself. 30 years ago. Different man. Same silence. Delilah's breath caught. I never told anyone what I left behind, the woman continued. Just packed a bag and moved 3 towns over, opened a bakery, raised my daughters, no headlines, no story. You had one, Delilah said gently. It just wasn't written down. The woman smiled, eyes wet. Thank you for writing yours. She bought 2 candles and left without saying more. And for Delilah, it was enough. Back upstairs, Jonah was waiting in the office. He had the paper open, one headline circled in red ink. City launches, zoning ethics probe following community reporting. Delilah sat beside him. It's happening. Jonah looked at her. You okay being the reason? She thought for a moment. I'm okay being the start. The bakery next door to Porch and Pine had a way of making the air smell like forgiveness. Every morning the scent of warm bread and vanilla sugar drifted through the walls, softening the edges of the past. Delilah sat at the shop counter stirring honey into her tea, watching the slow trickle of early customers wander in. Jonah hadn't come by yet. Not that she was waiting. But it had been 3 days since the article went live. 3 days since Rhea disappeared from the headlines and Cole's lawyers went suspiciously quiet. 3 days since Delilah had felt the adrenaline settle and the real weight begin to press in. She had expected noise. Instead, there was stillness. And the quiet, she realized, was sometimes louder than the chaos. Simone walked in from the back with a clipboard. Inventory's clean. We've got a restock on the journals and another order of that lavender balm. Good, Delilah said, grateful for something simple. Simone hesitated. Jonah called the shop phone last night. You were already gone. Delilah looked up. What did he say? Said he's stepping back for a bit. Said he didn't want to be a distraction now that the piece has landed. Delilah's fingers tightened slightly around her cup. A distraction, she echoed. Simone watched her. You okay with that? Delilah opened her mouth, then closed it. I don't know. Simone placed the clipboard down. Sometimes people step back not because they want out, but because they think it's what you need. Delilah exhaled. I hate that kind of guessing game. You've earned the right to ask for clarity. But Delilah didn't say more. She simply nodded. That afternoon, the clouds rolled in again. The weather felt out of sync with the calendar. Charleston should have been pushing spring by now, but the sky stayed gray, stubborn. Inez stopped by around 4 carrying a bag of groceries and a look that said he'd read something. He placed the paper on the counter. The headline read, Waterman Trust withdraws from Harrington project amid public scrutiny. Delilah scanned the article quickly. The foundation had pulled its funding. Cole's biggest backer. Gone. Her father didn't speak until she looked up. You know what this means? He said. He's unraveling. Inez nodded. His attorney released a statement about strategic repositioning. That's corporate speak for damage control. Delilah let the paper fall closed. I thought I'd feel something. Relief. Triumph. But it just feels hollow. She shook her head. I didn't want to win. I wanted to be heard. You were. Then why does it feel like I lost something anyway? Inez leaned on the counter, steady. Because there's grief in truth, too. Not every loss is a defeat, but it still leaves a mark. She looked at him, her voice almost too quiet. Do you think I was too kind? No, he said without hesitation. You were precise. You didn't swing wildly. You told the truth with your chin lifted. I didn't expect Jonah to disappear. Inez didn't answer that. That night the wind rose again, as if the city itself had something to say. Delilah stepped out onto the porch, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The street was quiet, porch lights glowing in pockets. She let the stillness settle. Then a voice broke it. You always look like a painting when it's raining. She turned. Jonah stood at the edge of the walkway, his hair damp, shirt sleeves pushed up. He looked tired but open. I was wondering if you'd come back, she said, not moving. I wasn't sure if I should. Why? He walked closer, slow. Because I didn't want to confuse things. I told your story, but I didn't want to take up space that wasn't mine. Delilah folded her arms, holding on to her ribs. That's not how it felt. No, it felt like you left before I could decide if I wanted you to stay. Jonah stopped a few feet from the steps. I didn't want to be another man who stayed too long where he wasn't welcome. She laughed once, quietly. You're not cold, Jonah. I know that, but I needed to be sure you knew it too. She looked at him for a long moment. Did you miss me every day? She stepped down one stair. Then why didn't you just say that? Because I didn't want to say it before you were ready to hear it. The wind picked up, sending her shawl fluttering. She didn't fix it. I'm not fragile, she said. I never thought you were, but I am still healing. I know, and I can't give you everything yet. He nodded. I'm not asking for everything. I'm asking for honesty, and maybe coffee. She smiled, small and real. I can do that. He stepped onto the porch. Not too close, not too fast. They sat on the porch, swinging the rain a soft hush around them. For a while they said nothing. Then Delilah broke the silence. When you wrote the article, she said you chose words that didn't humiliate him. Why Jonah looked out at the street? Because you never asked me to, and because dignity and storytelling is louder than drama, especially for women like you, like me, strong, soft, determined to walk out a fire without throwing sparks. She looked down at her hands. You know, she said, there's still a lot to figure out. I've got time, Jonah replied. And a good umbrella. She laughed, finally, that laugh that had been buried too long. Jonah looked over, his voice low. So, does this mean I'm invited to the next chapter? Delilah tilted her head. You're welcome in it, she said. As long as you remember this story started with me. He smiled. And I'll never forget it. Cole's empire began to fall on a Monday. It didn't crash, not all at once. But the cracks long hidden behind glossy brochures and rehearsed charm finally split wide enough for the city to see. It started with the City Zoning Commission. An anonymous tip, though Delilah had a good idea where it came from, launched a quiet investigation into how Harrington Properties had secured permits for the luxury Waterman development. By Wednesday, 3 local news outlets picked up the story. By Friday, the foundation that had backed Cole's most lucrative deal had pulled out entirely. And by the following Monday, it was on the front page of the Charleston Chronicle. Harrington's rise under fire, legal scrutiny deepens amid ethical concerns. Delilah sat at the cafe across the street from the courthouse, Jonah beside her, coffee untouched. They're saying he could face federal inquiries, Jonah said, scrolling through his phone. Misappropriation, zoning corruption, a few backdoor investor kickbacks, stuff no one ever thought would reach sunlight. Delilah stared out the window. The courthouse steps were crowded with cameras, reporters, and suited figures darting in and out like ants. He thought he was untouchable, she said softly. Jonah looked at her. They always do. Until the silence turns into receipts. She didn't answer right away. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly. The baby had been quiet this morning, settled calm, almost as if even he could sense the shift in the air. "Do you feel guilt?" Jonah asked carefully. Delilah shook her head. "I feel relief and sadness. Because this didn't have to happen. He could have chosen differently. But he didn't. No, he didn't." The cafe door opened, and Inez stepped in his coat dusted with drizzle. He spotted them and walked over, his usual composed presence grounding the room around him. "I just came from the commissioner's office," he said, sliding into the seat across from them. Cole's name came up more than once. Quiet but deliberate. Jonah leaned forward. "It's official then, it's starting," Inez confirmed. "Not public charges yet, but the inquiry's moving. He's being squeezed, and he knows it." Delilah took a slow breath. "What's he going to do?" Inez gave her a look that carried the weight of years. Men like him don't fall gracefully. They scramble. They deny. Sometimes they try to cut a deal. But what they never do is own it. She nodded, absorbing that. What happens to the people still working for him? Some will jump ship. Some will spin their stories. Others will pretend they knew all along. But there'll be a few. The ones who quietly walk away. They're the ones who'll build something better from the pieces. Jonah's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, eyebrows lifting. "You'll want to see this," he said, handing it to Delilah. It was a clip from a live interview. Cole sitting stiffly in a charcoal gray suit, no tie across from a news anchor who clearly smelled blood. "The allegations are baseless," Cole was saying, voice flat but forced. "It's unfortunate that personal issues have bled into public perception." The anchor pressed. "You're referring to the recent article your ex-wife's." Cole's eyes narrowed. "That story was crafted to damage me. Her father has personal ties to certain city officials. This isn't journalism. It's a vendetta." Delilah's fingers curled around the phone. She handed it back, expression unreadable. "He's grasping," Jonah said. "Trying to flip the narrative back into his favor." "Let him," Inez said. "The louder he shouts, the more transparent he becomes." Delilah stood slowly, placing her empty cup on the table. "Let's go. I want to see the shop." Porch and Pine felt like sanctuary. The moment she stepped through the door, the weight of headlines and accusations fell away. The air smelled like lavender and eucalyptus. Simone gave her a small wave, from the back eyes flicking with quiet support. On the front table, someone had rearranged the journal stacked beside a new chalkboard sign that read, "Healing happens in ink, too." Delilah smiled. She stepped behind the counter and opened the laptop, checking the shop's email. One subject line stood out. "Thank you." She clicked it open. "I don't know you, but I read your story. I've been sitting in a silent marriage for 9 years, afraid of what leaving would say about me. But your words made me feel less invisible. I'm not ready yet, but I will be. Thank you." Delilah blinked fast. Her throat tightened. Jonah walked up quietly behind her. "You okay?" She nodded, then turned the screen toward him. He read the message and exhaled. "That's why it mattered. That's why I did it." That night back at home, Inez stood in the kitchen, making his infamous slow-simmer gumbo. The kind that took all evening and turned the whole house into memory. Delilah sat at the kitchen island, barefoot, one hand tracing circles on her belly. "I saw the interview," she said after a while. Inez didn't turn around. "I figured. He mentioned you." "I heard. Are you worried?" He ladled broth into a bowl, turned, and handed it to her. "No, because the truth stands even when they try to bury it." Delilah took a sip. It was perfect, like always. She looked at her father. "You never hesitated." "I hesitated all the time," he said. "But I kept moving. That's what matters." The wind picked up outside, a spring storm rolling in. Delilah's voice was steady now. Do you think this is the end of his story? Inez looked out the window, then back at her. No. But it's the end of the version he controlled. She smiled softly. Then maybe that's enough. Later, she sat on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the storm move in. Jonah arrived quietly, holding 2 mugs. He handed her one. Chamomile. Don't argue. She smiled, taking it. They sat together, the silence easy now. I talked to a publisher today, he said after a while. They want to turn the article into a longer piece, maybe a book. Delilah glanced at him. Yours or mine, ours, if you want it. She didn't answer right away. Then, only if I get final edit. Jonah laughed. Done. The thunder rumbled low in the distance, and inside her the baby kicked soft, strong. Delilah smiled. The storm had changed direction. The storm passed by morning, leaving the streets rinsed and shining under a soft stretch of Carolina sunlight. Delilah stood by the window in her bedroom, the breeze lifting the sheer curtains as she watched water drip from the magnolia leaves. The world looked clean, but her thoughts were heavy stirred by a letter she'd received late the night before. It wasn't an email. It wasn't a text. It was a letter. Handwritten. From Cole. She hadn't opened it. It sat now on the kitchen counter in an envelope that looked almost shy, as if the paper itself carried regret. Inez hadn't touched it either. When she found it resting on the porch swing, sealed with only her first name scrawled in familiar slanted handwriting, she had simply brought it inside and set it down. Now, as she poured her morning tea, her eyes kept drifting back to it. She wasn't sure what she expected it to say. An apology. A last attempt at rewriting the story. Or maybe something more dangerous. A subtle pull on her heart. A manipulation wrapped in nostalgia. She sipped her tea slowly, letting the heat settle her. Then she walked over, picked up the envelope, and opened it. The first line stopped her breath. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll understand why I broke so many things trying to prove I wasn't broken. She read it again, then sat. The letter wasn't long. It rambled. It repeated itself in places. It carried the scent of someone unraveling slowly and trying to stitch together a past he'd treated like a disposable draft. I loved you, it said near the end. Even if I didn't know how to protect that love. Delilah folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She didn't cry. She didn't feel anger. She felt gratitude, not for him, but for the clarity, for the reminder that closure doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it just shows up as silence after reading the last word. The bell above the shop door jingled just before noon. Delilah looked up from arranging a display of pressed floral frames. Jonah walked in holding a brown bag and a hesitant smile. I brought lunch, he said. And before you say anything, yes, it's the chicken salad you like. No raisins, I swear. She smiled softly. Bribery is your new strategy. It's not bribery if you eat it voluntarily. They sat at the back table, the little nook behind the counter where soft jazz always played low, and the morning sun lingered longer than anywhere else in the store. Jonah opened the bag, pulled out 2 sandwiches, and a small container of lemon bars. I read the letter, he said quietly. Delilah paused, then nodded. He's spiraling, he's reflecting, Jonah said. Doesn't mean he's changing. No, but part of me still needed to hear the words, even if they were late. Did it help? She peeled back the wrapper on her sandwich. It helped confirm I made the right choice. Jonah leaned back. Do you still feel like this story belongs to you? She looked at him. More than ever. He nodded. Then maybe now's the time to think about what you want next. Delilah tilted her head. You mean besides raising a child and rebuilding my peace? He smiled. Yes. I mean, you've opened something here. A truth people are responding to. Have you thought about doing more with it? Like what workshops? Writing? Hosting gatherings for women who've gone through their own silent storms? She blinked. You think people would come? I think they already are. They're just not walking through the front door all at once. Delilah looked down at her tea. The idea wasn't new. It had been whispering to her in quiet hours. But hearing it aloud made it real. I'm not a therapist, she said. You don't have to be, Jonah replied. You're a mirror. You reflect what's possible. That afternoon, Simone found her in the office, scribbling notes on a legal pad. What are you working on? She asked. Delilah smiled. An idea. Maybe a series. Conversations around healing and resilience. Stories we carry but don't say out loud. Simone's eyes lit up, like a salon exactly like that. Casual, intimate, honest. I love it, Simone said. You know I'll help, I know. Later that week, they hosted the first porch light gathering. They moved the center display aside, brought in a circle of chairs, brewed warm cider, and lit candles. 8 women came, some alone, some with friends. No cameras, no press, just presence. Delilah opened with a simple statement. We're not here to fix each other, just to make space. One woman, Clara, shared about leaving a 30-year marriage after discovering a trail of debts her husband had hidden for years. Another, Mariah, spoke of losing her voice in a high-powered career where femininity was viewed as a weakness. The circle stayed unbroken. No one interrupted. No one advised. And when the night ended, no one left in a hurry. They lingered, hugged, promised to return. Jonah watched from the hallway, arms crossed, a quiet pride in his eyes. You built this, he said as Delilah walked over. She looked around the room, now dimmed, glowing with the residue of truth. No, she said. We built this. Together. Out of the ashes. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. There's a whole garden growing from those ashes now. And this time, Delilah didn't just smile. She believed him. The first signs of spring began to settle in Charleston, early blossoms, pushing through winter's leftover gray sunlight, lingering longer over porch rails, and a breeze that didn't bite, but whispered of second chances. Porch and pine smelled like new beginnings. Delilah stood near the window display, placing a handwritten quote on a small easel next to a stack of journals. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over permission. Simone passed by with a tray of fresh scones. We've got 16 RSVPs for the next gathering, she said. That includes 3 new names, 2 from out of town. Delilah looked up surprised. Out of town Greenville, and 1 from Charlotte. She smiled softly. Word travels fast when you speak the truth. There was a beat. Simone set the tray down and lowered her voice. Cole's in town. Delilah froze. Simone continued gently. I saw him this morning. Downtown. Alone? He didn't look like himself. Delilah turned back to the window. Did he see you? No. But I think he's trying to find a reason to bump into you. Delilah nodded once. Thanks for telling me. She spent the rest of the afternoon busying her hands arranging, cleaning, restocking candles, but her mind buzzed. Cole being in Charleston again meant one of 2 things. He wanted closure, or he wanted control. She didn't owe him either. By sunset, the store was quiet. Simone had gone home. Jonah hadn't arrived yet. Delilah moved to the back patio where a small garden had begun to bloom, planted by customers during one of the recent porch light gatherings. Every flower held a name. Each herb had a story. She kneeled beside the lavender fingers brushing the cool soil. I thought I'd find you here. She didn't turn right away. She knew the voice. Cole stepped into view. Slowly, hands in the pockets of a worn jacket, looking smaller somehow. Not physically, but something in him had folded. "I didn't come to make a scene," he said quietly, "or to argue." Delilah stood. She stayed calm. "Then say what you came to say." He looked at her for a long moment. "I lost everything. The contracts, the board, the money, even the apartment in Atlanta. They've distanced themselves. No one returns my calls." She nodded slowly. "Consequences?" "I know." Silence settled between them. "I came here hoping maybe you'd tell me how to start over," he said. "You always had that strength. I didn't know how to ask for it before." Delilah's voice was steady. "You start over by facing what you broke, not trying to rebuild it the same way." Cole looked down. "You were never the problem. I didn't know how to be with someone who wasn't impressed by my reflection." Delilah blinked. "I didn't need to be impressed, Cole. I needed to be respected." He winced. "I know that now." She studied him. "So what do you want from me? I don't want to be the villain in your story." Delilah sighed softly. "You don't get to decide what role you played. You wrote it with your choices." He looked away. "I'm not here to ask you to rewrite it. I needed to hear you say I'm not beyond redemption." Delilah's voice broke slightly. "That's not my role either." Cole took a step back, nodding. "You look peaceful." "I am." "And the baby?" She placed a hand on her belly. Strong. Quiet, just like his grandfather. That brought a sad smile to Cole's face. "You built a life I barely recognize, because it isn't yours anymore." He nodded once. "Goodbye, Delilah." "Goodbye, Cole." He turned and walked down the narrow path, disappearing past the garden's edge. Delilah stood still, heart beating fast but steady. Behind her, the screen door creaked. Jonah leaned against the frame. "Should I have stepped in?" "No," she said. "I needed to finish that chapter." He came closer, his presence warm grounding. "How do you feel, Clear?" she whispered. "I thought I'd feel grief or rage or something dramatic. But all I felt was distance, like I'd already walked 1,000 miles from who I used to be." Jonah slipped his hand into hers. "You have." She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the fading light settle over the blooms. "Do you think people really change?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I think some do, if they want it bad enough, if they do the work. And some just change the costume, not the heart." She nodded. Cole was the second kind. Jonah kissed the top of her head. "But you didn't just change. You transformed." She smiled. And inside her, the baby stirred like a promise that life would keep moving forward even after storms, even after loss. Maybe especially then. Spring arrived like a whisper, not a shout. It crept into Charleston with jasmine on the breeze and warm light through the shutters at Porch and Pine. Inside the shelves were full, the journals nearly sold out, and every candle flickered, as if it too had survived something. Delilah stood at the counter with her hand over her belly, counting the seconds between the baby's soft kicks. Her due date was close. Closer than anyone liked to admit. The nursery was ready. The hospital bag packed. But she hadn't written the baby's name on anything just yet. She wasn't waiting for the perfect name. She was waiting for the moment she knew. Jonah leaned through the doorway from the back room glasses, slipping down his nose, ink smudged on his fingers. "I just finished editing the final chapter," he said. Delilah looked up. "You're sure it's ready? It's honest. That makes it ready." She smiled. "I want to read it tonight. After dinner." He nodded and came out to the front, brushing past her with a quick kiss on the temple. "I'll hold you to that." They moved easily now, like parts of a rhythm they hadn't planned but welcomed. There were no titles between them. No pressure. No demands. Just a daily quiet decision to be present. The shop phone rang, and Delilah answered. Her face shifted as she listened. "Wait, what?" "Slow down," she said, eyebrows tightening. "What do you mean? She's here." Jonah stopped mid-step. Delilah held up a hand, listening again. "Tell her I'm on the way." She hung up. "Ria's at the cafe on Broad," she said. "Asking for me?" Jonah blinked. "Ria Cole's Ria." Delilah nodded. "Apparently she's not with him anymore. She left 3 weeks ago. Moved out, left the apartment, everything. Did she say why she didn't say anything? Just asked to speak to me in person?" Jonah hesitated. "You don't have to go. You've earned your peace." "I know," Delilah said quietly. "But I also know what it's like to feel alone when the illusion finally cracks." The cafe on Broad was nearly empty when Delilah walked in. The staff knew her now offered soft smiles and extra pillows for the bench seat she chose. Ria sat in the corner looking nothing like the polished woman from Cole's yacht parties. Her hair was pulled back messily, no makeup, eyes rimmed red. Delilah sat without speaking. Ria looked up, swallowing hard. "I didn't know who else to call." "That's a surprising sentence," Delilah said, calm but direct. "I know. And I don't deserve your kindness." "Then why ask for it?" Ria hesitated. "Because you're the only one who walked away and kept your soul." The words hit like truth. Delilah let the silence stretch between them. "I thought I had it all," Ria continued. "Money, access, glamour. But it was all wrapped around Cole's ego. And the second I stopped feeding it, he cut me off. Not just emotionally, financially, legally, everything." Delilah tilted her head. "You didn't know that would happen. I thought I was different," Ria whispered. "That he loved me more. That he had changed." Delilah didn't flinch. That's how the story always goes. Until it doesn't. Ria looked down at her cup fingers, trembling. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know what I was part of. I was cruel to you. I helped hide what he was doing. I ignored my gut. Then why am I here, Ria? I wanted to say I'm sorry. Genuinely. And I wanted to tell you something. About the business." Delilah leaned forward slightly. "Cole's not just losing investors," Ria said. "He's hiding assets, offshore, property under shell companies. He's trying to make sure he lands somewhere soft when the collapse finishes." Delilah's jaw tightened. "Why tell me this? Because your father's involved," Ria said. "His name's come up more than once in calls Cole had. He's planning something to damage Inez's record, to discredit his integrity. If it sticks, it could ruin his reputation. And Cole knows it's the only card he has left to hurt you." Delilah stared at her heart, pounding now. "Why would you warn me?" she asked again. "Because I was used. And I see it now. You might be the only one who can stop what's coming." Delilah exhaled slowly. "You're late. But maybe not too late." "I'll help however I can," Ria said. "I've already started documenting everything. I just need to know if someone will believe me." Delilah stood. "We believe actions more than words. If you're serious, bring what you have. Give it to Jonah. Let it speak." Ria stood too. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm not thanking you," Delilah replied. "But I hear you. And that's more than you gave me back then." Back at Porch and Pine, she walked in just as Inez was hanging a new framed quote near the register. He turned at the sound of the bell, took one look at her face, and knew. What happened? She told him everything, Ria's confession, Cole's plan, the risk. Inez listened, arms folded, jaw set. I figured he'd have a last move. "This one's personal," Delilah said. "But we can stop it." "I'm not afraid of losing," Inez said. "But I am tired of being dragged through other people's messes." Delilah stepped closer. "We don't have to react. We just have to shine the light first. He nodded. I'll reach out to some friends. Quiet ones. People who know where the real stories live. That evening, Jonah and Delilah sat side by side, poring through a folder of documents Rhea had delivered in a plain manila envelope. Account statements, fake names, text transcripts. It was all there. Enough to prove Cole was grasping at shadows. Jonah looked at her eyes steady. This could end it for him. Completely. Delilah didn't blink. Then let it. She looked down at her stomach where the baby gave one soft push as if nudging her forward. The past had spoken. Now it was time to answer. The Charleston sky was wide and cloudless that morning, pale blue like a fresh start. Delilah sat on the porch swing outside her home, her real home, now not a house borrowed from a fantasy she no longer believed in. Her hands rested on her belly, still and round, heavy with promise. The baby had been quiet that morning, as if sensing the calm in her mother's spirit. Inside, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors, catching the pages of a thick folder laid out on the dining room table. It was the last of the evidence Rhea had brought forward. Every line of it had been reviewed, cross-checked, and discreetly handed off to a legal team Inez trusted with his life. There'd be hearings, quiet investigations, and eventually headlines. But none of that concerned Delilah now. She had no interest in seeing Cole fall further. He'd already lost the only thing that could have saved him character. "Morning," Jonah said gently, stepping onto the porch with 2 mugs. One for her herbal and caffeine-free. One for him black and bitter, like he liked it. Delilah looked up, smiling. "You always know what I need." "I listen," he said, sitting beside her. They rocked together in silence for a moment, the wood creaking softly beneath them. "Inez heard from his contact," Jonah said. "It's done. Cole's offshore accounts are exposed. His last fallback is gone." Delilah didn't flinch. "Will he be okay?" Jonah paused. "I think he'll be alone for a long time. But maybe that's where he'll finally hear himself." She nodded slowly. "That's not my story to write anymore." Jonah set his mug down, watching her face carefully. "You've come so far, you know. I hope you see it." "I do," she said quietly. "I feel it in my bones. I didn't just walk away from him. I walked toward myself." There was a knock at the door. Delilah frowned gently and looked toward it. "Are we expecting someone?" Jonah shook his head. She stood carefully, hand on the rail, and moved to the door. When she opened it, her breath caught. It was Rhea, but not the fragile, hollow woman from the cafe. This version stood taller, with clarity in her eyes and a worn leather notebook in her hand. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said softly. Delilah looked at her for a long moment, then opened the door wider. "Come in." They sat around the kitchen island. Rhea placed the notebook gently on the counter. "It's everything I never said," she said. "Every time I bit my tongue. Every time I lied to myself. I thought maybe someone out there might need it." Delilah flipped through the pages, handwritten entries, memories, reflections. "Do you want to share this at the next porchlight gathering?" she asked. Rhea blinked. "You'd let me?" Delilah met her eyes. "You earned that by telling the truth when it mattered." Tears welled in Rhea's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Thank you for not slamming the door." Delilah smiled. "Doors are meant to be opened. Just not all of them stay that way." After Rhea left, the house felt lighter, brighter even. That evening, as dusk colored the windows, Delilah sat at her desk with a pen in hand. She was writing a letter. Not to Cole, not to the world, but to her unborn child. "My sweet one, you were my anchor in the storm even before I heard your heartbeat. You reminded me that love isn't loud or demanding. It's quiet, steady. It's what remains when the fantasy burns away. You are not a continuation of my past. You are the beginning of everything new." She folded the letter and placed it in a small box beside a baby blanket her mother had knitted before passing. An hour later, she felt the first contraction. They weren't painful at first, just a tightening, like a full breath being held too long. She looked at the clock, then at Jonah, who was reading beside her. "It's time," she whispered. His book fell closed with a thud. Now she nodded, half laughing, half nervous. Now. They moved with calm, purpose-practiced steps. The bag was by the door, the car already filled with gas. At the hospital, everything slowed down. Monitors beeped, nurses came and went. Jonah never left her side. And when the moment came, it was not fireworks, it was not cinematic. It was breath and silence, and then the sound of life crying out into the world for the first time. They placed the baby on her chest, and Delilah's heart cracked open. A boy. He blinked at her, as if he already knew everything she had been through. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "You're safe now." Jonah stood beside her, brushing back her damp hair. "He's beautiful. He's ours," she said, voice breaking. Later, when the hospital room dimmed and the hallway grew quiet, Delilah stared out the window at the Charleston skyline glowing faintly in the distance. Everything she'd lost had led her here, not just to survival, but to something fuller, something freer. Jonah pulled the chair closer and held her hand. "What will you name him?" Delilah smiled. "Silas." He tilted his head. "Why Silas? Because it means of the forest, strong, rooted, quietly enduring." Jonah nodded. "It suits him." The baby stirred a soft whimper rising from the bassinet. Delilah reached over, lifted him gently, and held him close. "This is where the story begins," she whispered. "The real one." Outside, the moon rose slowly. The city slept. And in that quiet room, a woman who had once been shattered held everything that mattered in her arms, not as someone who won, but as someone who rebuilt. Brick by honest brick. From silence, from grace, and from strength, no one saw coming.